reminder of a stump speech, but I'm going to spare you guys tonight. And I know time is short. If you want to see all the theater, come down to the Galway at 5:30 on Friday. They asked me down to stand on a chair, so you can check that out. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm running, and then we can take questions. My name is Kosta Demos. I have lived in Forest Hills essentially all of my life. My family moved here when I was about 9. I've been active in local politics and politicking probably for about 3 decades, mostly at the grassroots level, working both at the party level in terms of the ward committee and being a delegate and stuff like that, working on the neighborhood council, but mostly working on issue-specific things like housing justice, working for a better economy, a fairer economy, with United for a Fair Economy, and also with a lot of small nonprofit arts groups. My main background is in the arts, and that's still how I make my living. My wife and I run a small business called Third Eye Photo. We do fine art reproduction, and we do portfolio and presentation work for people who are commercial and fine artists. My draw into local politics is mostly just because I love this place, and it's really fun. I can't lie to you. That's how I got involved. In terms of this race, there's a lot I could say about the backstory in this race and why I'm rather offended by the way it's unfolding. But I'm not going to dwell on that this evening. I'd rather talk about what I can address that interests you. So fire away.
All right. So our first question is about charter reform. In your questionnaire, you offered a strong commitment to charter reform, but we're looking for a few more details on your 2 priorities. The first question really, what are your suggestions to create more parity between the mayor and city council?
Well, it's pretty basic. I think that most of us have an idea in our head about how a democratic system is supposed to work. You have different branches of government that are essentially co-equal, and they ride herd on each other. So, at the national or the state level, you have an executive, and you have a judiciary, and you have a legislative, and they all overlook each other. And same at the national level, you see that, obviously, we're watching the congressional elections right now. The sort of system I admire most is the parliamentary system that we see in most European countries, where the executive emerges from the legislative majority, but is responsible to that legislative majority. Here in Boston, I think that it's time to stop pussyfooting around about this. We live in an authoritarian state. I know, I've had friends say that Boston is like a medieval feudal walled city, but that's not true. We're more like a 16th century Italian city-state, where you have one central figure who controls everything, and I admit that our mayor doesn't poison very many people like the Medici do. But essentially, that's how we function. We only have one branch of government, and that branch of government is accountable to nobody. And I think that now that we have an opportunity to re-examine the charter and how the city functions at the most basic level, that addressing this fact has to be on the table. I don't see anybody willing to take this on aggressively in this council race. And I think, frankly, most of us know that this race was set up to be ignored, to be a handoff to somebody who is not going to examine the power structure that exists in this city. I know here in this community, there's a great commitment to grassroots power. And I want to be the voice for that. So, in terms of the basic functioning of government, that's my primo issue. I have no idea whether I can succeed, but I know that there are other people interested, not just on the Boston City Council today, but also in legislative bodies and delegations in other cities that are facing the same issues. And I've been talking to people in cities across the Commonwealth, because that's what it's ultimately going to take, is coalition building. Second thing is electoral reform. Our current run, am I going on too long?
No, but we definitely want to get you to specific suggestions. So what specific changes?
My specific suggestion is that our legislative branch, which is the council, which is essentially toothless now, except for voting up or down on the budget, and sort of dangles like a vestigial limb off the mayor's office should be an actual branch of government. Otherwise, we're just paying for a very expensive staff for the mayor, an 80-plus large piece. That's very expensive. If we can't actually pony out real work for the city council, we should can it. So that's what I'm working for. I want the city council to be a real representative body that's working on real legislation that can challenge the mayor when he goes overboard. And this isn't just Menino, it's any mayor.
Your second priority was, or the question really is, how would you propose realigning the city council seats and to what end?
Well, periodically, we do redistricting, just like we do in the congressional seats, the legislative seats. That happens similarly at the city council level. And every time this comes up, there are rumblings about the fact that the city council districts are too large, that they shortchange certain communities. For instance, I go over in Roslindale, they're always pissed off because they feel like the red-headed bastard child of this district. They're always shoved to the side and ignored, and no offense. And they're divided between 2 or 3 districts. I can't remember. But we, here in the 6, we have a little slice to the west of Rosie, and then Bob has a little slice, and they feel sort of screwed. Here in this district, in terms of the main apportionment, we're essentially bifurcated. We have Jamaica Plain and we have West Roxbury that are very, very different places. And I'm not saying this as anything against folks in West Roxbury. It's a really neat place. More people from Jamaica Plain should go over there. But it's a different place. It's a different community. They have a lot of different priorities at this point about what they want from city government. There are people over there who would like to see their own seat. I don't know if that's possible to reapportion things so that we have more seats, for instance, or to make things be aligned a little more to the actual geographic reality of the communities. It's something that has to be worked on, and I'd love to try.
Second question, that was all under question number 1, charter reform. One of the bigger issues in the city council and mayoral races last year was the role of the BRA and whether any reforms to the BRA were needed. Do you think the BRA currently does a good job, particularly with regards to housing development projects in District 6, or are there any specific changes you would suggest?
Well, the evils of the BRA are not specific to Jamaica Plain or West Roxbury. I think that the BRA has completely outlived its usefulness, if it ever had one. It's a relic from a period in the earlier part of the 20th century when people felt that they had to reshape cities and transportation systems along block models that would be hampered by local government. This is an issue close to me on a couple of levels, at the family and the community level. When my family moved here, basically my first idea of politics was being drummed out to GBC meetings and being dragooned to stand in front of bulldozers for I-95. And my wife actually grew up in Greenwich Village next door to Jane Jacobs, who I was lucky enough to meet before she died. I really believe in a planning process that respects community and that treats communities like clients. And our current system just doesn't do that. By linking development and design and planning, essentially we're ceding everything to the development wing of interest. I think that we should do what a lot of other cities do. We should have an architectural commission or a planning commission which is peer reviewed by, say, the Boston Society of Architects or the AIA. And then we should have a development committee which consists of economists and people in the development community who will have their seat at the table, and they hash it out at the cabinet level. The current system is a mess. And it's a mess also at the community level where I think probably I'd be safe to say that everybody here, their idea of city planning was shaped by the urban renewal of the 50s through the 70s, which was a horrible experience. And here in Boston, we need to grow up a bit and realize that the field of city planning has changed and evolved. There are lots of really great ideas there, and the people who walk up in front of you aren't necessarily your enemy or trying to shove something down your throat. But until we change the structure of the BRA, it's impossible to take these guys seriously and believe that they're respecting us. So I think we have to change that fundamentally.
Moving on to education. You said in your questionnaire that you would oppose the closings of any elementary schools. But we know that there are 4,500 open seats in the Boston Public Schools right now. How do you propose dealing with these open seats?
Well, I think that I would understand if we had to mothball some schools. I think that we're suffering right now from the whole-scale abandonment of school infrastructure that happened in the last 2 decades. Beautiful buildings, useful buildings, which were sold off after the great middle-class flight from our school system to reduce the school population so drastically. These are buildings that we could be using now if they hadn't been tossed aside. I think that everybody wants the goal, to realize the goal of quality schools within walking distance of every child in this city. I don't think there's any argument about that. Teachers, parents, administrators, everybody agrees on that. The problem is how you go about it. And in the drive to have walk-to schools right now, there is a certain claque that basically is motivated by a kind of I've got mine attitude in communities that are a little more well off, a little more well organized, to say, hey, we've got our stuff together, just give it to us, and hell with the rest of the town. I don't believe in that. And I think that the only way we can have walk-to schools is by establishing a consensus within the various communities around the city. For people in the Hispanic community, for people in the African American community, any discussion of walk-to schools immediately brings this 800-pound gorilla into the room of de facto segregation. And it doesn't matter that we're already in a system of de facto segregation. They just see another monster coming down the road. So the first task is going to be establishing trust. You know, people have to really feel that their community concerns are being taken into account. Most of the community processes in the city right now are essentially window dressing that wear people down so that the administration can do what they want. I'm talking about real community-based planning. We need that in schools, we need that in economic development, we need that in city planning, and we're going to need that very much in the schools. There's such a lack of trust in schools, such a lack of trust of teachers, which distresses me greatly because my mom was an educator and a librarian, and I come from a family of academics, and I know a lot of teachers who bust their asses every day and go above and beyond the call of duty to deliver for the kids under their care, and they are being pilloried in public. And I say no mas on that.
Yeah, actually, we're